She used to laugh like that. Loud, full, the kind of laugh that filled a room and made strangers smile without knowing why. She used to walk into a room and own it, not because she was trying to, but because she was just that alive. She had built her life with her own two hands, a career she was proud of, a home she had made warm, children she had raised mostly on her own, and a sense of self that had taken years, real, hard, painful years, to earn. She was not a woman who needed saving. She was not a woman who needed anyone to tell her who she was. She knew exactly who she was. And then she met him. And somewhere between the first dinner and the last goodbye, she forgot. He never hit her. He never screamed. He never left a single bruise anyone could see. But by the time she realized what he had done to her, she barely recognized the woman in the mirror. This is the story of how one man, charming, patient, and calculated, dismantled a woman piece by piece, and how she fought her way back. What you are about to hear is more common than you think. Stay with me, because the moment she finally understood what he was doing to her will change the way you see the people closest to you. Before we go any further, we want to hear from you. Drop a comment right now and let us know where in the world you're watching from. We would love to hear from you. And if you have not already, hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Now, let us get into this story. Her name was Carol. She was 47 years old when she met him. She lived in a mid-sized city in the Midwest, Columbus, Ohio, to be exact, in a house she had bought herself after her first marriage ended. She had two kids, a boy and a girl, both in middle school. She worked as an assistant principal at a public school, the kind of job that demands everything from you and gives back just enough to keep you going. Her colleagues described her as the person who remembered everyone's birthday, who stayed late without being asked, who gave more than she ever expected in return. Her best friend of 20 years, a woman named Renee, would later say that Carol was the strongest person she had ever known. Not in a loud way, in a quiet, unshakable way. The kind of strength that comes from having already survived something hard and choosing to keep going anyway. Carol had been through a difficult first marriage in her early 30s. Her ex-husband was not cruel. He was simply absent. Emotionally unavailable in the way that some men are. The kind of absence that does not announce itself but slowly hollows out a relationship from the inside. When it ended, Carol did not fall apart. She grieved, she adjusted, she rebuilt. She went back to school, finished her master's degree, got the promotion she had been working toward, and raised her children with a steadiness that impressed everyone around her. By the time she was in her mid-40s, she had built something real, something that was entirely hers, and she was proud of it. She had earned the right to be proud of it. She was not looking for anyone when she met Marcus. That matters. She was not lonely in the desperate way that makes people overlook things they should not overlook. She was content. She had friends, she had her kids, she had her work, she had a full life. And that is exactly why, when Marcus came along, she did not see him as a rescue. She saw him as a choice, a free, clear-eyed, deliberate choice. And that distinction, that she chose him from a place of wholeness, not need, is what made what happened next so devastating. They met at a dinner party hosted by a mutual friend in the early fall. Marcus was 52. He was tall, well-dressed in that effortless way that suggests money without announcing it. He was a regional director for a logistics company, traveled frequently, and had the kind of easy confidence that comes from years of walking into rooms and knowing how to read them. He was divorced, had been for 3 years, he said. No drama, he said. They had just grown apart. He had 2 adult children he spoke about warmly. He was the kind of man who asked follow-up questions, who remembered what you said last week and brought it up this week, who made you feel, in the middle of a crowded room, like you were the only person worth talking to. Carol's friend Renee was at that dinner party. She would later say that she liked Marcus immediately, that he seemed genuine, that he seemed like exactly the kind of steady, attentive man that Carol deserved after everything she had been through. And that is the thing about men like Marcus. They do not come in wearing a warning label. They come in wearing a smile that reaches their eyes and a warmth that feels completely real. Because in the beginning, it is real. Or at least, it feels that way. And the difference between those two things is something you only understand in hindsight. By Thanksgiving, Marcus and Carol were spending most weekends together. By Christmas, he had met her kids. He was good with them, patient, interested, not trying too hard. Her son, Tyler, who was 12 and deeply suspicious of any man his mother brought home, warmed up to Marcus faster than Carol expected. Her daughter, Lily, who was 10 and more open, adored him almost immediately. Carol told her sister that it felt different this time. Safer. Like she had finally found someone who truly saw her, not just the capable, put-together version of her that she showed the world, but the real her, the tired her, the hopeful her, the her that still wanted to be loved in a simple, uncomplicated way. And that openness, that beautiful, hard-won openness, was exactly what Marcus needed. Because what Carol did not know, what she had no way of knowing in those warm early months, was that Marcus had done this before. Not in the way that most people mean when they say that. Not just the ordinary pattern of falling in love and falling out of it. What Marcus had done before was this. Specifically this. The careful attention. The perfect questions. The way he made a woman feel chosen. He had done it with his ex-wife, Sandra, who had quietly rebuilt her life in Phoenix, and did not talk about her marriage to anyone who did not already know. He had done it with a woman named Patricia, who he had dated for 2 years before Carol, and who had ended things in a state of such profound confusion about her own reality that she had spent 6 months in therapy just trying to remember who she was before him. Neither of these women knew about the other, and neither of them knew about Carol. This is the part of the story where most people expect a dramatic reveal, a moment where the mask slips and the monster underneath becomes visible. But that is not how this works. That is not how men like Marcus work. The mask does not slip. It shifts. Slowly. Incrementally. In ways so small that by the time you notice the change, you have already adjusted to it. You have already made 100 tiny accommodations. You have already rewritten 100 small moments in your own memory to make them make sense. And by the time you realize what has happened, you are so far from where you started that you cannot even see the beginning from where you're standing. It started with a comment about her laugh. They were at a work event of his company dinner, the kind with assigned seating and too much wine. Carol was seated next to one of Marcus's colleagues, a funny man named Greg, who had her laughing so hard at one point that she had to put her fork down. It was the kind of laugh she was known for. Full, unguarded, alive. On the drive home, Marcus was quiet. Not angry quiet, just quiet. And when Carol asked him what was wrong, he said, and she would remember this exact phrasing for years, he said, "Nothing's wrong. I just think sometimes you don't realize how you come across in professional settings." She asked him what he meant. He said, "You were a little loud tonight. It's fine. I just want people to take you seriously." And then he changed the subject. Carol sat with that comment for days. She turned it over and over in her mind. Was she too loud? Had she embarrassed him? She thought about the way she laughed, the way she always had, and for the first time in her adult life, she felt something she had not felt since she was a teenager. She felt self-conscious about it. She did not say anything to Renee. She did not say anything to her sister. She filed it away in the part of her mind where she kept things she was not sure what to do with. And she laughed a little more quietly at the next event they attended together. And Marcus smiled at her across the table. And she felt relieved. And she did not yet understand what that relief was costing her. That is how it begins. Not with a shout, with a whisper, with a single carefully placed comment that plants a seed of doubt so small you barely feel it go in. According to research on covert emotional abuse documented by organizations like the MEND Project, https://themendproject.com/healing-from-a-covert-narcissist/. This is one of the most consistent patterns reported by survivors. The abuse begins not with cruelty, but with correction, with concern, with the language of love wrapped around the architecture of control. Over the next several months, the comments continued. They were never loud. They were never mean in any way that Carol could point to and say, "That was wrong." They were always delivered in the tone of someone who cared, someone who wanted the best for her. Her outfit at a family gathering. "I just think you looked better in the blue one. But wear whatever you want." Her parenting, when she let Tyler stay up late on a school night. "I'm not criticizing you. I just wonder sometimes if the kids need more structure." Her work, when she stayed late 3 nights in a row to prepare for a school board presentation. "I just feel like sometimes your job takes priority over us, and I don't know if that's healthy for you." Always framed as concern. Always ending with a softener. Always leaving Carol with the faint, uncomfortable feeling that she had done something wrong without being able to say exactly what. She started second-guessing herself. Small things at first. What to wear. What to order at dinner. Whether to share an opinion at a gathering or keep it to herself. She started watching Marcus's face when she spoke, not because she was afraid of him, but because she had begun to use his reaction as a barometer for whether what she was saying was worth saying. She did not notice herself doing this. That is the thing that survivors of this kind of abuse say over and over again in their accounts. They did not notice themselves changing. The change was too gradual, too quiet, like the way a room gets darker when the sun goes down. You do not notice the moment it happens. You just look up one day and realize you cannot see clearly anymore. Renee noticed before Carol did. She would say later that the first sign was the canceling. Carol started canceling plans. Not dramatically, not with excuses that raised red flags, just quietly, consistently, choosing Marcus over the friendships she had maintained for decades. At first, Renee assumed it was just the natural pull of a new relationship. She had seen it before. She gave it time, but the canceling did not stop. And when Carol did show up, she was different. Quieter, more careful with her words, less likely to share an opinion without first softening it with a disclaimer. Renee told her husband one night that Carol seemed like she was always bracing for something, like a woman who had learned to make herself smaller in a room she used to fill. By the time they had been together for a year, Carol had quietly stepped back from most of her social life. She still saw Renee occasionally, still called her sister on Sundays, still showed up for her kids in all the ways that mattered. But the version of herself that existed outside of Marcus, the loud-laughing, opinion-having, room-filling version, had grown very quiet. And the quieter she became, the more Marcus seemed to relax, the more warmth he showed her, the more he told her she was the most important person in his life. And Carol, who had been slowly starved of that warmth through 100 small withdrawals, felt it like sunlight. She leaned into it. She did not yet understand that the warmth was a reward for her compliance, that the coldness had been a punishment for her independence, that the entire system had been designed, consciously or not, to teach her that the version of herself that Marcus approved of was the only version worth being. This is what psychologists and abuse recovery specialists describe as coercive control, a pattern of behavior that seeks to take away the victim's liberty or freedom and strip away their sense of self. It does not require physical violence. It does not require screaming or threats. It requires only patience, consistency, and the willingness to use love as leverage. As one survivor documented in her recovery account on Catherine Chestnut's website, the distortion of truth through subtle manipulation was so complete that she believed everything wrong in her life was her own fault. That is not an accident. That is a result. The gaslighting started in the second year. That is what Carol would eventually call it, though she did not have that word for it at the time. At the time, she just thought she was losing her mind. It began with small things. A conversation she remembered clearly that Marcus insisted had never happened. A plan they had made that he denied making. A comment he had said that he swore he had never said. Each individual instance was small enough to dismiss. Maybe she had misremembered. Maybe she had been tired. Maybe she was, as Marcus sometimes gently suggested, too emotional to remember things accurately. But the instances accumulated. And with each one, Carol's trust in her own memory eroded a little more. She started keeping notes on her phone, not because she suspected anything, but because she was genuinely afraid that something was wrong with her mind. She started second-guessing her own recollections in conversations with other people. She started prefacing her memories with, "I think," and "I might be wrong, but," in ways she never had before. Her sister, a woman named Donna, who lived in Cincinnati and spoke to Carol every Sunday without fail, noticed the change in her language. She told Carol once, gently, that she seemed less sure of herself than she used to be. Carol laughed it off, said she was just tired, said work had been stressful, said everything was fine. And she believed it when she said it. That is the most important thing to understand about what was happening to Carol. She was not in denial. She genuinely did not see it. The erosion had been so slow, so carefully managed, that she had no reference point for how far she had drifted from herself. She had adjusted to each new version of her reality so completely that she had forgotten there had ever been a different one. In the third year, Marcus began working on her career. It was subtle at first, a comment here and there about how much she worked, how stressed she seemed, how maybe the job was taking more from her than it was giving back. He framed it as concern for her health. He framed it as wanting more time with her. He framed it as love. But the effect of those comments, delivered consistently over months, was that Carol began to feel guilty about her ambition. She had always been proud of her work. She had worked hard to get where she was. But under the steady drip of Marcus's concern, she began to see her career not as an achievement, but as a problem. A thing that was getting in the way of the relationship. A thing that was making her difficult to love. She turned down a promotion that year. She told her principal she needed to focus on her personal life. Her principal, a woman who had mentored Carol for a decade, was stunned. She asked Carol if everything was okay. Carol said yes. She believed it when she said it. Around this same time, Marcus began making comments about her appearance with more frequency. They were always delivered as preferences, never as criticisms. "I just think you looked better when your hair was longer." "I don't know. I feel like you've been dressing differently lately." "You used to take more care with how you looked." "I'm not saying anything, I just noticed." Carol started spending more time getting ready in the morning. She started asking Marcus's opinion before she got dressed. She started looking at herself in the mirror the way you look at something you are not sure is good enough. She had never done that before. Not once in 47 years had she looked at herself that way, and she did not notice that she had started. The isolation deepened quietly, so Marcus did not tell Carol to stop seeing her friends. He never issued an ultimatum. He never made a demand. What he did was make the aftermath of her social time uncomfortable enough that she began to avoid it. If she came home from dinner with Renee laughing and relaxed, Marcus would be distant. Not angry, just withdrawn. Cool. And Carol, who had learned to read his moods the way a sailor reads weather, would spend the rest of the evening trying to warm him back up, trying to figure out what she had done, trying to close the distance he had created. And eventually, it became easier to not go to dinner with Renee than to come home to that silence. It became easier to cancel than to manage the aftermath. And so she canceled. Again and again and again. Until Renee stopped asking as often. So until the friendships that had sustained Carol for decades became thin and infrequent. Until the only person Carol was really talking to, really confiding in, really depending on, was Marcus. That is the architecture of isolation. It does not look like a cage. It looks like a preference. It looks like choosing your partner over your friends, which is something people do all the time in relationships. It looks like prioritizing your relationship, which sounds healthy. It looks like love. And by the time you realize that the walls have gone up around you, you have helped build them yourself, one canceled plan at a time. Renee would say later, in the quiet devastation of hindsight, that she blamed herself for not pushing harder, for not showing up at Carol's door and refusing to leave until Carol talked to her. But Renee also said something else, something that matters more. She said that Carol was not a passive participant in her own isolation. She was an active one, not because she wanted to be isolated, but because she had been trained, slowly and expertly, to believe that her friendships were a threat to her relationship, that choosing herself was the same as choosing against Marcus, and that choosing against Marcus meant losing the only warmth she had left. By the time their second anniversary came around, Carol's closest friends barely recognized her. The woman who had once walked into rooms and filled them was now the woman who sat at the edge of them. The woman who had once had opinions about everything now prefaced every thought with an apology. The woman who had once laughed so loudly that strangers smiled was now careful, always careful, about how much space she took up. She had lost weight she had not needed to lose. She had stopped wearing the colors she loved, because Marcus had once said he preferred her in neutrals. She had stopped telling the funny stories she used to tell, because Marcus had once said she talked too much at parties. She had stopped being Carol, and the terrifying thing, the thing that would take her a long time to fully reckon with, was that she had not noticed it happening. She had been present for every single moment of her own disappearance, and had not seen a single one of them for what it was. This is what survivors of covert narcissistic abuse describe with a consistency that is almost eerie. In account after account, from the Betrayal Trauma Recovery podcast to personal testimonies shared on recovery platforms, women describe the same experience: the gradual, invisible nature of the erosion, the way it happens in increments too small to name, the way each individual moment seems manageable, even reasonable, even loving, and the way the accumulation of those moments adds up to something that, when you finally see it whole, takes your breath away. Carol had not yet seen it whole. She was still inside it, still adjusting, still managing, still trying to be the version of herself that Marcus could love without withdrawing. And then, one Tuesday morning in March, she reached for her phone on the kitchen counter and picked up Marcus's by mistake. And the screen lit up. And everything changed. The name on the screen was one she did not recognize. The message was 3 words. 3 words that Carol read once, and then read again, and then stood very still with for a long moment while the coffee maker finished brewing, and the morning light came through the kitchen window, and the world continued on as if nothing had just shifted on its axis. She put the phone down. She picked up her own. She stood in her kitchen for a very long time. And then she did something she had not done in almost 2 years. She called Renee. She did not tell Renee everything that morning. She told her enough. And Renee, who had been waiting for this call for longer than Carol knew, got in her car and drove across town and sat at Carol's kitchen table and listened. And as Carol talked, haltingly at first, then faster, then with a kind of desperate urgency, something began to happen. The pieces that had been scattered across 3 years of small moments began to arrange themselves into a shape, a recognizable, terrible shape. The comment about her laugh, the turned-down promotion, the canceled dinners, the mornings she had spent trying to figure out what she had done wrong, the notes on her phone because she no longer trusted her own memory, the colors she no longer wore, the stories she no longer told, the laugh she no longer laughed. Renee sat across from her and did not say, "I told you so." She did not say anything for a long moment. And then she said, very quietly, "Carol, this has a name." Carol spent the next 72 hours doing what she had always done when she needed to understand something. She researched. She read. She went down every thread and followed every link and sat with her laptop in the quiet of her bedroom after her kids were asleep and read account after account after account of women who had lived through exactly what she had lived through. Women who described the same patterns, the same language, the same slow, invisible erosion, the same moment of sudden, terrible clarity. She found the term coercive control. She found the term gaslighting, She found the term narcissistic emotional abuse. And she found, in the testimonies of women she had never met, a mirror so precise that it made her physically ill. One account in particular stopped her cold. A woman writing about her own recovery described the moment she realized what had been done to her, not as a moment of anger, but as a moment of grief. Grief for the years. For grief for the self she had slowly handed over. Grief for the woman she had been before she met him. The woman she had not even realized she was losing until she was already mostly gone. Carol read that and sat in the dark of her bedroom and cried in a way she had not cried in years. Not from pain, from recognition, from the profound, disorienting relief of being seen, even by a stranger, even on a screen, in a way she had not been seen in a very long time. She was not crazy. She was not too sensitive. She was not the problem. She had been deliberately, systematically, and patiently broken down by someone who knew exactly what he was doing. And the fact that he had never raised his voice, never left a bruise, never done anything that the world would recognize as abuse, that did not make it less real. It made it more dangerous. Because the world does not rally around wounds it cannot see. When Carol confronted Marcus, she was calm. That surprised her. She had expected to be shaking, to be crying, to be the version of herself that Marcus had spent 3 years convincing her she was. Emotional, unreliable, too much. But she was not any of those things. She was still, she was certain. She laid out what she had found on his phone. She told him what she had been reading. She told him what she now understood about the last 3 years. And Marcus, who had never once in 3 years raised his voice at her, looked at her with an expression she had never seen on his face before. Not anger, not guilt. Something colder than either of those things. And he said, in the same measured and reasonable tone he had used for every comment and every correction and every gentle suggestion over 3 years, "Carol, you're doing it again. You're making something out of nothing. This is exactly why people find you exhausting." She had heard variations of that sentence 100 times. It had worked 100 times. It had sent her back into herself, back into the spiral of self-doubt, back to the question of what she had done wrong. But this time, for the first time, it did not work. Because this time, Carol had a name for what he was doing. And having a name for something, it turns out, is one of the most powerful things in the world. You cannot fight what you cannot see. But once you can see it, once you can name it, it loses the power it had when it was invisible. She looked at Marcus for a long moment. Xiao, and then she said, "I know what you're doing, and it's not going to work anymore." She left that weekend. She did not scream. She did not beg. She did not explain herself to anyone who was not ready to understand. She packed what she needed. She told her kids they were going to stay with Aunt Donna for a little while, and she walked out of the house that Marcus had slowly made smaller and smaller until it barely fit her anymore. She did not look back. Not because she was not afraid. She was terrified, in the way that anyone is terrified when they walk away from the only warmth they have known for 3 years, even when that warmth was conditional, even when it was a tool. She was terrified, and she left anyway. Marcus called, he texted. He went through the full cycle that survivors describe with such consistency, it has its own name. The hoovering, the love bombing, the sudden return of all the warmth and attention and tenderness that had been so carefully rationed for 3 years. He told her she was the love of his life. He told her he would change. He told her she was making a mistake. He told her, in one message, that Carol would later show her therapist, that she was throwing away the best thing that ever happened to her. Carol read that message and felt something she had not expected to feel. She felt sorry for him. Not in the way that would pull her back. In the way that you feel sorry for someone who is so lost inside their own story that they cannot see the damage they leave behind them. She did not respond. She blocked his number. And she made an appointment with a therapist. The therapist's name was Dr. Patricia Hale. She was a licensed clinical psychologist who specialized in trauma and emotional abuse recovery. Carol sat in her office 3 weeks after leaving Marcus and told her everything. All of it. From the dinner party in the fall, to the message on the phone, to the 72 hours of reading in the dark. Dr. Hale listened without interrupting, and when Carol finished, Dr. Hale asked her to do something. She asked her to pull out her phone and find the oldest photo she had of herself, from before she met Marcus. Carol scrolled back through her camera roll, past the last 3 years, past the careful, quiet, neutral-colored version of herself, back to a photo from a birthday dinner with Renee. She was laughing, loud, full, unguarded, alive. So she stared at that photo for a long time, and then she looked up at Dr. Hale and said very quietly, "I forgot she existed." Dr. Hale leaned forward and said something that Carol would carry with her for the rest of her life. She said, "The fact that you can see the difference, that is not damage, that is survival. That is the part of him that he could not reach." And for the first time in 3 years, Carol cried from relief. Recovery was not a straight line. Carol would be the first to tell you that. There were days when she woke up and felt the absence of Marcus like a physical thing, not because she missed him, but because she had organized so much of herself around managing him that without him, she did not immediately know what to do with the space. There were days when she heard his voice in her head, the measured and reasonable voice telling her she was too much, too loud, too emotional, not enough. There were days when she caught herself apologizing for things that did not require an apology, or softening an opinion before she had even finished forming it, or looking around a room to gauge whether she was taking up too much space. The habits of 3 years do not disappear because the relationship does. They linger. They have to be unlearned, one moment at a time, with patience and intention and a great deal of grace toward yourself. But there were also other days. Days when she laughed. Really laughed. The full, unguarded, room-filling laugh. And did not feel guilty about it. Days when she wore the colors she loved and did not think about whether Marcus would have approved. Days when she told a funny story at a dinner with Renee and did not watch anyone's face to see if she was taking up too much space. Days when she looked in the mirror and recognized the woman looking back at her. Those days came slowly at first, and then more often. And then, eventually, they became the rule rather than the exception. 6 months after leaving Marcus, Carol started a support group. It was informal at first, just a few women she had connected with through an online forum for survivors of emotional abuse, meeting at her kitchen table on Thursday evenings. But word spread, the way it does when something fills a need that people did not know how to name. Within a year, the group had grown to more than 30 women. Women of all ages, all backgrounds, all stories. Women who had been through what Carol had been through. And women who were still in the middle of it, and women who were not sure yet what they were in the middle of, but knew that something was wrong. Carol sat with all of them. She listened. She told her story. And every single time, without exception, at least one woman in the room said the same thing. The same 4 words, in the same quiet, stunned voice. "I thought it was me." That is the sentence that lives at the center of this story. Not the betrayal, not the manipulation, not even the recovery. That sentence. Because that sentence is the whole mechanism. That is how it works. That is how a man who never raises his voice, never leaves a bruise, never does anything the world would recognize as abuse. That is how he does it. He makes you believe it is you. He makes you the problem. He makes you the unreliable narrator of your own life. And once you believe that, once you have handed over your trust in your own perception, he does not need to do anything else. You will do the rest yourself. As for Marcus, Carol heard through a mutual friend, about 8 months after she left, that he had started seeing someone new. A woman named Deborah, 50 years old, a nurse, warm, funny, confident. Her friends said she was the life of every party she walked into. Carol heard that and sat with it for a long time. She thought about calling Deborah. She thought about what she would say. She thought about whether it would matter, whether Deborah would believe her, whether the warning would land, or whether it would just sound like a bitter ex-girlfriend. She thought about all the things she had not known when she met Marcus, all the things she could not have known, all the things that only become visible in hindsight. She did not call Deborah, she prayed for her instead, and she hoped, with everything she had, that Deborah's friends were paying attention. Because that is the other thing that lives at the center of this story. The people around Carol, Renee, her sister Donna, her colleagues, her friends, they saw the change in her. They noticed. They felt the distance. They watched her become quieter, smaller, more careful. And most of them said nothing. Not because they did not care, because they did not know what they were seeing. Because covert emotional abuse does not look like abuse from the outside. It looks like a woman who has gotten quieter. It looks like a woman who is very devoted to her partner. It looks like a woman who has changed a little since she started dating someone new, which is something people do all the time. It does not look like a woman who is being systematically dismantled. And so the people who loved Carol watched it happen and did not know how to name what they were watching. And that is the lesson that Carol carries into every Thursday evening at her kitchen table. Not just for the women who are in it, for the people who love them, for the friends and sisters and colleagues who are watching someone they love become quieter and smaller and more careful, and do not yet have the words for what they are seeing. Now you do. This story is not about a monster. It is about something far more dangerous than a monster. A man who looked completely normal, who your friends liked, who your family approved of, who said all the right things and asked all the right questions and made you feel, for a little while, like you had finally found the thing you had been looking for. Covert emotional abuse does not leave bruises. It leaves silence. It leaves a woman who flinches at her own opinions. It leaves a woman who apologizes for taking up space. It leaves a woman who has forgotten the sound of her own laugh. And it is happening right now, in living rooms and kitchens and bedrooms across this country, to women who are smart and strong and completely blindsided. To women who would tell you, if you asked them, that they are fine, that everything is fine, that they are just tired, that they are just adjusting, that they are just adjusting, that they are just trying to be a better partner. If you are watching this and something in this story felt familiar, not like a story you heard, but like a story you lived, I want you to hear this. You're not too sensitive. You're not too much. You're not the problem. And the fact that you're still here, still watching, still trying to understand what happened to you or what is happening to you right now, that is not weakness. That is the part of you that he could not reach. Hold on to that part. It knows the way back. If this story moved you, if it hit somewhere close to home, drop a heart in the comments. You do not have to say anything else. Just a heart, I will know. And if you know a woman who needs to hear this story, share it with her. Quietly. It might be the most important thing you do today. The last thing Carol said in our conversation was this. She said, I used to think the hardest part was leaving, but the hardest part was remembering who I was before I met him, because he had been so thorough. He had been so patient. He had worked so carefully and so quietly that by the time I left, I had to go back almost 3 years just to find her. And when I found her, when I finally found her again, I made her a promise. I told her, nobody gets to make you this small again. Nobody! She laughed when she said it, loud, full. The kind of laugh that fills a room and makes strangers smile without knowing why. She got it back.